Hello, we are Tangled Time, History Hidden Threads. I'm Dr. Lydia Stomina and Tad Whitmire. We are the co-hosts of this podcast, and we went live last month. This is our second podcast, and I can see the days when it will be 100 podcasts. Can you see that, Tad?
I'm hopeful. Yeah, that'll be fun.
I think it will be because last time the interest was there, and I think we can approach this topic from many different directions. So last time it was Karen Anderson with the history of the first United Methodist Church in Independence, the church on the square, and it was fascinating. And of course, we will have Karen back one time, as well as we will have other church members who will talk about the history of the church. But since the topic is and the title for our podcast, and Ted and I, we both worked on that kind of twisted title that is a tongue twister, as we laughed. So, Tangled Time, that means it's not only about history, but it is also about our present time. And then, of course, it kind of entangles with the past, and then takes us into the future. And since Ted, you are a different generation, so let's talk about you today. You are co-host, but I decided that would be a great thing to interview you today. And thank you for agreeing to answer the questions that we will offer today to our audience. So first question will be, and I will put them one after another on the screen, and then Ted will be answering them in the same order. How have your own experiences and backgrounds influenced the way you view and interpret history? While you're thinking, I will put the second question on the screen. Are there moments from your own life that, in retrospect, tie into larger historical themes? And the third one, since you are an actor, besides that you're a teacher, and here in Independence, this is about your artistic side, um, culture's mirror. How have art, literature, and music reflected the trend and spirit of their respective times, of your respective times, of our respective times? So, whatever you observe is so important today, Ted. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay, you're a very brave man. So, first question. How have your own experiences and backgrounds influenced the way you view and interpret history? You view it.
Yeah. So I am a teacher. It was kind of a long path to get to that point, but I've been teaching now for 7 years. And what got me to that point was kind of my interest in history and learning learning about myself, learning about the world, learning about other people. And so I think, my educational background has a lot to do with the way I view and interpret history. I got a bachelor's degree in English, and, what got me into that was reading science fiction. And science fiction has a lot to do with, the future and looking toward the future and where technology and different aspects of society are going to lead us. And so kind of understanding the past help form those potential futures, those predictions or imaginative futures that people have come up with. And so, yeah, I think, my research and interest have made it so that I engage with history, and I'd like to be critical with my investigation into history, look at it from different viewpoints, because I've seen a lot of narratives that aren't entirely factual or true, or they're biased in some way. And so, I like to get multiple sources, maybe primary sources. But I think educationally, this comes from my parents as well. My dad was really into both science fiction and then also like historical novels. He read a lot of Westerns, and he was a big influence on my interest in reading growing up. And I feel like it all boils back down to that original interest, which just started broadening my perspective, my horizon, and just recognizing how big the world is and how much has happened to bring us to this point now. And of course, history is so vast. We don't have, all the details of history. We get maybe like 0.1% of all the information that happened passed down to the next generation. So a lot of lives, don't get any posterity, right? A lot of it doesn't get down to us. So I try to find what I can and try to piece that together and try to understand this world we're living in. And of course, it's an incomplete picture. That's why I often heavily lean on my faith as far as understanding things. But I like to take a lot of personal history as well. I like to hear people's stories, their lives, and how they had to overcome certain things, experience certain things, certain maybe historical events that they've had to go through, like, Vietnam War. I have an uncle who was killed in the Vietnam War when he was drafted as a teenager. And I had a grandpa was in World War II. A lot of veterans in my family. Both my father figures, my stepdad, my dad were in the military, and so that certainly influenced them, which then influences me as well. So certainly all those family connections, those close, immediate people in my life have informed how I understand and interact and interpret history.
Interesting that you mentioned that you have several grandfathers, relatives who were veterans of a certain war, like either Vietnam War or the World War II even. And that's what I think brings us together, because with my background, I'm very much influenced by the World War II memoirs and movies and books, and of course people who are alive. And of course, there are fewer and fewer of those people. That's very important that you have a relative like that. How old is he?
Well, that was actually my grandpa who passed. He passed
He
several
passed now,
several years
yeah.
ago. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. So what is your most kind of vivid memory of his stories about the World War II?
um, he is my stepmom's father, and I'll have to say I didn't get to listen to enough of his stories as far as World War II goes. I have like five sets of grandparents because of my family, so a lot of grandparents. And he's one that I didn't get to talk to he too much before he passed about his history, and that is kind of a loss. I'm sure I could connect with my stepmom and my aunt and uncle on that side, and they would have lots of stories about his experience in World War II. But you got to be in the right position and the right time to kind of draw those stories out of people. Sometimes, I mean, I know some people just like to share them, but he wasn't really one to just open up and share his war
It's
stories.
painful memories. I'm sure that like veterans of the Vietnam War probably also not much willing to talk about it. But I'm glad that you mentioned the word such a loss. Yeah, children
I know he
especially
was.
now. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I know he was in the Corps of Engineers, so I know he did a
Oh,
lot of engineering
I
work
see.
for the
Wow.
military,
Oh,
and so I'm not exactly
and
sure the details of where he was in World War II. Um,
uh-huh.
but I could find that out and I can share that
Yeah,
with you.
please,
'Cause,
please, it's interesting. Anyway, but coming back to your personal experiences, and you're right, your background, even the fact that you mentioned you have such an extended family, and it all affects you as an individual, as a person, as a young man. And then you bring it to your students in the school where you teach. Then you bring it to our church, Independence First United Methodist Church. Everything you say is who you are, and I think you make your own trace in history, even simply speaking. And that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, let's go back to our first podcast when Karen Anderson spoke and you co hosted that podcast. How did it affect you and your memories? You, because I saw how vivid your kind of your face became alive when you talked and listened to Karen Anderson, because you relate to so many memories and you just immediately reacted to even the word history of the church, all those tunnels under the church. And so, do you remember the year when you came to Independence First Church?
Yeah, I believe it was July of 2016 or 17. Yeah, one of those. But
So
yeah, it was
you and
pretty.
your sister, yeah, did not grow up in the church, did you?
No, we went to another United Methodist church in Independence.
Hmm.
We went
But
to
so, what
Christ.
did you find fascinating in this church that made you stay?
Well, yeah, as you said, my sister was going there when I first started attending. My mom was going there as well. Um, I was just coming back into my faith. I'd been out of it for a long time. I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and I had a moment when I was 13 or so, and I kind of and I decided to look elsewhere for meaning and purpose and understanding and peace. And I didn't find it until I did have a moment where I reconnected. I just turned 30, so this is right after that. I was in Colorado. I was doing this little solo hiking trip in some mountains, and that's when I kind of realized God was there, and He's always been there, and just waiting for me to come back. And so I did come back. Kind of left early on my trip, and I came right back home, and I talked to my parents, and I shared that experience with them, and they were supportive of that. And so I started going to church. I picked the church my parents, or well, at least my mom and my sister were going to, and it was a familiar, somewhat familiar because it was a United Methodist church. Um, First United Methodist Church happens to be a little older than Christ United Methodist, where I went before, and I found that fascinating. Once my faith in Christianity was, rekindled, the history of Christianity and just the history of our world became that much more real and that much more meaningful to me because, I kind of think of the C.S. Lewis quote, it's like the Christianity is like the sun, through the sun, I see everything else. And through Christianity, I can see everything else more clearly. Like, kind of understand more how we got to this point and this reality we're living in. And so that historic aspect of the church drew me in. The people of the church really drew me in. They were all really kind and they embraced me and they let me join some groups. They gave me some jobs to do. Pastor JC at the time was really willing to listen to me and answer my questions and kind of put me on the path, keep me pointed straight, right? And really appreciated that. And I think those are some specific things about the church. There's more. They had some activities and stuff that I got to get involved in. Started choir and other things. But yeah, and the ambiance, the atmosphere of the church. It's a nicely kept church, and it's a nice area. I love the square. I grew up in Independence, and I spent a lot of time on the square doing various things. So overall, I mean, it just all came together. They gave me a place and a purpose, and they were super generous and gracious with me.
Yeah, they are super generous and gracious. I'm glad you said that. That's what I experienced. I'm here only for the third month, and every day, I see the same what you just said. Very generous, loving, very hardworking people. And I think this is important because this square in Independence went through so many different historical events. And of course, that kind of solidified that spirit, I think, working people, high morals, integrity, support. So that's very important. And I think the whole country, the whole nation stands on that kind of foundation. And every celebration that people have, like especially the 4th of July, and then now we are facing more celebrations in this in winter. I think every time when we meet people here on the square and in the church, it just opens up a new page for me of this city. And that's why, since you're part of the city and you were born in Independence, Missouri, correct?
That's right.
You and your sister Rachel. So then, let's talk a little about how your background, like for example, you mentioned, I remember we talked, you have Native American blood in your family, and we have quite a few Native American families in the church. Then you also have European blood, so you kind of have a mixture. So does it make you see things in history different from, again, like you said, you have a very extended family? So anything that happened in the past, when you read, do you see it a little different from how you read it in the books, or see it in the news, or see it in the movies? Because the reason I say that, I remember how my dad, he will watch movies about, let's say, 20s, right? A time of World War One, even, or World War Two, and he will jump and say, "No, that's not right. We did not have pillowcases at that time." And you see, it's a simple thing that we watch, and we'll say, "Well, big deal, it's a pillowcase." But he was, or he will say, "No, we did not have wooden floors in our houses at that time." I said, "What did you have?" And simply, like, just a ground, compressed ground, and people just will sweep it, and that's it in the village. And that's, I think it's very important to preserve what you hear from your grandfathers, and they preserved it from their grandfathers. So, what did you see any inconsistencies like this when you watch movies or read the books about history?
Yeah. I do have some Native American background. I'm 1/8 Cherokee, and my dad's a quarter Cherokee. My dad's dad, is half Cherokee, and he grew up on a reservation out in Oklahoma, part of his childhood. And my dad would tell me stories about that, how he was kind of mistreated because he was half white, and so he got some of that, you know, inverse racism, I guess, from the Native Americans, who the full-blooded Native Americans there at the school. And I'm not sure if it was a government-sponsored school. I believe it was. I hear it wasn't a great school. I believe my grandfather ran away from there as soon as he could. He was there. He did have his mother, but his mother wasn't able to take care of him for some reason, and so he had to be in the school for like ages 13, 14, 15 or something. And so he had a hard life growing up, and dad kind of had a hard life growing up too, growing up with and without his dad. And so, I do hear some talk of how Native Americans have to deal with the poverty that they have to experience because of their situation, being put on reservations and just not having adequate health care, education, just general support, and how they kind of get drawn into alcoholism, right, is a big thing related to Native Americans. And that's not untrue in my own family. As my grandfather, that's what he died young in his 50s. And my dad, managed to quit in his, I think, 30s. But that was an issue for him, and it caused some serious problems, probably, the divorce with my mom. So that aspect of Native American history, I do see portrayed to some extent, but having kind of lived part of it, it kind of informs me in a way that I haven't seen in movies or anything. But certainly that has been discussed in movies, and I can relate to it and connect to it and try to kind of understand it in a different way. As far as like my European side, I do. My dad's dad, my grandpa's brother Calvin, so my great uncle, he did trace our lineage back pretty far to like the late 1700s, and that takes us all the way back to Germany. And so I guess we came over from Germany in the late 1700s, and we landed in, I believe, North Carolina or South Carolina, one of those, and then we made it over here in the 1820s. I guess that's when they started integrating with the Native American population, and at some point they considered themselves full blood. I don't know exactly how it all really shakes out. But yeah, some my great grandfather, who was named Tad as well, was considered full blooded. And we're all on the the rolls, the list of Native Americans. I don't have my official tribal card, but yeah, all that stuff seems to inform my reception of the media I consume and the information I consume about both Native Americans and Europeans. I'm not just German, like my mom's side. There's French and English, and I kind of consider myself kind of a European mutt of some kind. But I kind of know more about the Cherokee side. My dad was really connected to that, and had a lot of trinkets related. And of course, my grandfather was really connected to it, and he was an artist, kind of a self-trained artist, and we have a lot of his artwork, paintings, and stuff that are related to his Native American heritage. So I don't know if I quite answered your question. It's certainly that my origin does kind of impact how I receive media, but
Oh, absolutely. And I think, yeah.
I grew up in suburbs of Independence, so it's still once removed from me, right? So I only have stories that I can kind of and try to incorporate into my identity in some way, and I share with people, my Native American heritage, and connect with them over that. Like you said, there's a few people at the church who are Native American, and I've had some great conversations about our families and histories and stuff. So.
And that's what I admire you for, Ted, that you are who you are. You don't try to be different who you are. And you are not apologetical about your backgrounds and how you see the world. And like you said, you share. You share your views, you share your passions. And I like that you love the mountains. That's what brings us together. Lots in common, because I grew up with my dad, who was a mountain climber. And I went quite a few times with him to the north of the Ural Mountains and to the Caucasus Mountains. So I know this is where you truly find God. And this is how you connected your coming to this church, because you felt like you connected to the divine, and then you needed to find the kind of application. You came to a local church. We are so blessed to have you as our worship leader and the leader of the church, one of the leaders. So this is a very promising, I think, message that you have today for younger generations. But also, I think it is very important for older generations to hear that their lives do matter. Their lives what impact us, your generation, your sister's generation, and then it will be, and her children, your students. And thank you for sharing everything you know with your students. And I think that that is what should happen. And also that you talked about Native American people. I've learned, for example, if not talking to people who have this genetic line, I would not know, for example, that you cannot call costumes. I thought it's costumes that they wear. But Joe Gray corrected me, no, this is a regalia. And you see, this is, I think, why we have this podcast started, that we can share. And it's absolutely so natural to hear new words and make new links to people, to cultures, to traditions. And so from this point, as kind of since we're still on this your personal view and your personal interpretation of history. Since we kind of had so many events, you mentioned the World War II, you mentioned Korean War, but the 20th century was not just about wars, which was, of course, a lot about wars and genocide and Holocaust and all these tragedies in the World War II, Korean War, Pearl Harbor, everything, nuclear war. And of course, you were not yet born back then. I'm not saying that I was, but it was much later. But you and I both experienced, for example, ending of the Cold War. And you kind of lived even in the midst of that. And then this technological progress, that is just a boom. So what do you want to talk about more about, since you are so much in technology too? Maybe what influenced you more? Cold War probably was far away at this time, but technology. how did you grow up, and how does your generation think differently just because of that impact? It's a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think it's even more of an impact on the current generation of kids. But my generation, yeah, was kind of the beginning of it. I mean, I grew up, I was 11 years old, and we got our first dial-up modem. So we had internet since I was, 10 or 11, and I started engaging that with really early. I was, on the computer probably every day at that time, and was when some of the first chat rooms and messengers and the games and websites, like the internet world was a lot different in the 90s, but it was something I connected with quickly. I found friends online. I was able to engage with information in a way that people in previous generations wouldn't be able to, and I'm sure it's impacting the way we think and behave. We see that nowadays with kids who grow up with tablets and phones from very young age. My nephew uses a phone at 3 years old and watches shows on it or plays games on it. And I think it's important we limit those, but it's not going anywhere. And I think they are useful way to get information, externalize some of our own information that we can use, and when we need it, those different applications that let us function more efficiently. So definitely think it kind of keeps people, it does keep people like behind in some ways, because you have to keep learning this new technology. I mean, right now, AI is coming out, and that's going to have a huge impact on everything. It already has had a huge impact in just the year it's been out. I'm using it for my teaching, and I'm trying to help other teachers leverage that to help it lessen their work, but also improve their teaching, right? So, I mean, it may lessen some work over here, but it gives you more opportunity to use that time for this over here. And so I think being adaptable is really a necessary skill that we need to develop, and just be willing to attempt to use these different technologies to make our lives easier. Hopefully that's what it does. I know technology does have its drawbacks, but I'm a fan, and living through it. I mean, I tell that to my students all the time, and I show them different videos that kind of help them try to understand the generation that they're living in, right? The way that we've lived the past 30 years is a way we've never lived as a human species, for the thousands of years beforehand, however far you want to go back. So we're living in a time where our everyday life is entirely different than it ever has been in previous generations.
Absolutely, especially with the amount of information that now we have to process every day. And comparing with the previous generations, when it was already a lot, people read a lot, encyclopedia, but now just like absolutely kaleidoscope, and you have to find a way to keep your sanity in a way, right? Find a solution for yourself and choose and pick what you respond, what you watch. But at the same time, I think it's a great opportunity to grow. And it's also a great savior of time that we put into research, like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. It's another step. But even before that, with all the, like you mentioned, your 3-year-old nephew uses iPad or iPhone to watch shows. And of course, parents watch that, how we use the screen. But at the same time, I think it's a huge plus. But at the same, on another angle, this is where I think our communication with the older generation might suffer, because I'm so glad you help your colleagues and people who may be a little behind, and that's what we do in the church. That's a whole meaning of this podcast, that we help people to connect on the same level, and we bring those who do not have yet experience to use social media or their gear that they have probably handy, but the usage is maybe very limited. So that's what I think we created this podcast as a Tangled Times. And it's important because this is how history works, right? And if not for technology, then imagine how much loss humanity will have if humanity did not go into the space, Americans did not land on the moon. Also, all this now internet, Wi-Fi, and it's started actually as a military probably feature, but then gradually it became so important for the whole society, and I think it's a great thing. And so many things start as a scientific research, and then but then become a property of just any household. But so from what you just said, it took us already. We started answering the question of the other moments from your own life that in retrospect tie into larger historical things. So you talked about we decided not to touch the Cold War. Now we mentioned the space, but you chose the technology, which is a big part of who you are. And this is very important. It's a school teaching. It's our church streaming that we now purchased a new equipment. We will have our worship services taken absolutely on a new level, because many people asked us, all the people ask who watch it from home, will we have on the screen what we see here on the screens in the sanctuary? And we said, yes, you will have scripture readings on your screen at home. So it will be constant, different, like we hear. For example, I'll put you solo, right? And then we are both on the screen. That's what people will be. I'm kind of illustrating. That's what they will be seeing on their screens at home. But so, what were those larger historical themes that impacted you as who you are now?
So we talked about kind of the evolution of technology, and that's a big one. I mean, if we talk like familial themes, family themes, we got stuff to cover there. We kind of talked about, my own family went through a divorce, and it was alcoholism. Both my stepdad and my dad dealt with that, and other family members, and so that I think follows kind of historical trend. But fortunately, for the most part, that all worked out, but it certainly made childhood difficult. And so, just like many other people from history, childhood was tough. And here we are living in, post 9/11. That was kind of a big moment that changed the world. And I lived through that. I was in 10th grade, and I wasn't really mature enough to process it, even though I was, pretty smart from my, I just didn't know how to really understand that, and it took several years before that really made sense to me, I guess. And even it took years before I really had the cultural understanding to put that in perspective. But I obviously knew something big happened, and people died, and we responded to it. But I wasn't in a position to engage with it then. But certainly, looking back, I've incorporated that into my own life and understanding of history and where we're at and where we're going. And you mentioned how technology has produced so much information, and we're in the information age, and now we're in this point where we're in this like misinformation age, where there's so much information out there. A lot of it is not true, right? I mean, it's misinformation in some way. And so I think that's something we have seen in the past, but I think it's something that is maybe even more of a problem now, right? I mean, just because.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, in how your life personally is tied to historical events. And yes, it is September the 11th. And but I'm glad you brought up topics that are not like historical things, but they are alcoholism, right? Drug addiction. So anything that happens and people experience it on a daily basis, And now you brought up this misinformation, which is a huge part of actually technology and social media trends, right? So hence we talk about the trends. Cultural mirror now. That's kind of takes you now even more to who you are as a person, because you have so many angles of yourself that I already see, and you show it to people so generously, like you are a teacher, also you are an actor, and you are worship leader, and you also teach Sunday school class. So you see how many sides of you share with other people. So let's talk a little about the cultural aspect, like a cultural mirror, because you see what happens, we reflect. It's our becomes our own personal story. So how is art and literature and music, and you read so much, reflected the trend and spirit of this respective time that you live in?
So yeah, I'm kind of an experimenter or a learner. I like to learn new things. That's one of my, I guess, strengths. Though I don't often won't go super deep into certain things. But I mean, acting I got into, and that's something we see a lot of in like movies and shows, and I was exposed to a lot of that. But theater is a lot impactful, at least here in Independence. I'm sure Kansas City puts on some good shows, the Kauffman Stadium stuff as well. But TV and movies have kind of theater, but it's been really great being able to be a part of that and kind of understand where TV and movies have come from, and kind of lower stake opportunity to be a part of something like that. And so most of the plays I've been in have been like church plays. There was one that wasn't particularly a church play, but several plays now, and as an adult, and really rewarding. Getting to know people, doing some ministry, but we don't get huge crowds. I mean, I think we got maybe 100 people at one of our plays, 100 plus on one of our nights, but we have 3 nights of shows, so we do end up showing 100, 200 people. So it's great to give people that opportunity to see something different, engage a little differently. And I try to bring that a little bit into my classroom, and we do some acting, little scripts, and that helps us understand what we're reading. And of course, literature as an English teacher, I've kind of read the classics. I've read all the way, 2,000 years ago to modern times, and could certainly see how literature connects with the time period that it's produced in. But we see it evolve and build upon all these different aspects of literature that have been developing over the years. And so nowadays we got all kinds of literature, and I think that kind of represents the cultural diversity that we have nowadays. And so anything you're interested in, there's literature out there that is right up your alley. So I think that's great. I think all the different technology has offered a lot of different mediums to express, for people to express themselves. Like I said, I've dabbled in a lot of different things. I've done painting and graphic art, and I've written poetry and fiction, and done some animations, and there's just so many ways people can express themselves, and I think that's a great.
It works like yours. Both of your quirks function.
Some audio
That's technology.
but yeah, there it is. But yeah, and then music, right? I have a relationship to music. I play the guitar. I own several guitars.
And that I did not know yet. I didn't even play guitar.
I haven't led worship maybe a couple times, small setting, but I really just learned on my own, and so I don't feel confident in it, but I love just playing at my house, and trying to play other people's music and connect with that, because I really enjoy music. But and again, see a lot of opportunity nowadays for people to engage with that, whereas they might not have in the past. And so it's great I have a guitar in my classroom, and I share that with my students. and just try to inspire them and give them those options, right? Just let them know that that's an option for any of them. If they are interested, motivated, they can do that and see where it takes them.
Wonderful. And before I ask you a question about, give us your favorite author, the name of the favorite author, your most favorite movie, and also your favorite music style. Then before that, I just want to say that to all people who watch us, what a wonderful gift you are as a guest. I know that I put you in a spot today because you're a co-host, but this is how people who watch us today, who will be our guests in the future. We've met during Santa Caligon so many interesting people, and I talked to a few of them to become our guests. And of course, we have a line of people from the church. Members who will be our guests. So we will continue going back into the past of the city and this church, and again into the future, present time. But you're such a gift, Ted, because I think of looking at you and listening to you, such an inspiration to older adults, to my age, and to also to younger people, that we constantly need to read. We need to go to theaters, and I know that many of our members go to theaters very actively. But kids, you see, kids do not read as much. Do you share that concern? So that's what I think is such a gift, that you are right there with kids, with students. You have your guitar, and you show that yes, you're not you maybe are a geek. I don't know yet, but you're very generous, and you explore various sides of life. You love history, you love theater, you love music, you love science, Paul, everything. And I think that that is what is important for them, to know that they need to learn, they need to read, they need to talk to people. But also, we will talk about it later, how you present yourself, how caring you are. And I don't want to put you into this uncomfortable place, but this is how people see you. And I think this is what the church needs to kind of have as a to model as a leadership role for kids, and also not to be apologetical or ashamed of that. Yes, we invite people to come to church, right? Because this is where they can shape their skills, they can shape their musical talents, they can shape themselves as leaders and speakers. And but simply praying together will teach us to be humble, will help us to work on our morals, also to value our history and our past. And your example, Ted, teaches us about the importance of family. Yes, families can be broken, extended, put together, but we need to be all together. It doesn't matter what in the end, right? Because society is very kind of broken and violent, and we need to avoid that by all means. And that's what I think we created this podcast. Yes, some moments in history are painful, and but they teach us a lesson. Some moments in history are bloody, and that teaches us to avoid another bloodshed. Some moments in history teach us of the importance of bringing the truth up on the surface. Truth about Native Americans, truth about wars, about everything, and avoid this disinformation that sometimes we hear on TV. And that's what questions now to you: your favorite author, your favorite movie, and your favorite music genre. Because that will shape
And
kids to kind of, and us adults, like, wow, I did not pay attention to this genre yet. Maybe I need to explore. So help us to grow.
I will share those, but I just wanted to comment on something you said. I just think, it's been the church has been a great space for me to kind of lean into those gifts and those interests that God has given me, and just be able to share those with others and explore those in a safe space where there's a lot of support. And I have seen a lot of that over the past 6 years that I've been there. So and some of my favorites. It's really hard for me to pin down a favorite, but I'll give you a favorite. Not my my total favorite. I've got like 100 favorites of everything, but favorite writer, I'd probably point to C.S. Lewis. He's been a big inspiration to me over the past, since my conversion, my reconnection with God. Chronicles of Narnia. I'm currently reading that in my classroom for my independent reading time. We all read every day, 15 minutes, each of my classes. So I'm reading that book, that series actually, and sharing some of that with my students as we reflect on our reading. After we read, everyone answers a question. So I'm through the question. But yeah, C.S. Lewis, read his fiction. He's got a great sci-fi trilogy, and he's got essays and Christian-based books like Mere Christianity. I've read that several times. So yeah, he's super awesome. One of my favorites. Could point to quite a few others. I'll lift him up. And movies. Gosh, big list of movies. I like Lord of the Rings. That would be up there. It's a fantasy series, and it's by J.R. Tolkien, right? Most people know about Lord of the Rings. I've read the books and The Hobbit, and read the Silmarillion, right? There's a book that he wrote that's kind of like an encyclopedia for the Lord of the Rings world, Middle Earth. And he was a friend of C.S. Lewis, so it's kind of interesting. They have a background and history together. They'd share their writing, and one was a Catholic and one was an Anglican, so they'd have discussions about that. So it's really interesting. And favorite genre of music, I've really gotten into contemporary Christian music. I listen to that quite a bit, but I'd probably point to something like folky or indie, kind of Bob Dylan-esque or something. Some of the contemporary bands I would like, or like Mumford & Sons or Modest Mouse. There's kind of my age. I don't know if they're still even together, but yeah, just guys with acoustic guitars and drums and love songs or breakup songs or songs about life,
Wonderful. That's very good. That's very good to start with. And I think you maybe can continue and share with your students all the books, because this is a good guide for them what to read, where to start. Because when you take the right book and you cannot put it down, that impacts your whole life. And then you start reading. And I think that's what we need to help people to get back to reading, especially about history. And that's what Tangled Time. History's hidden threads. Our time comes to the end. Thank you, Ted. We are looking forward to have and to co-host our future guests together. And we don't know yet, will it be once a month, right? Or it will be gradually every other week. We are working on that. But that's what we do now at our First Church on the Square, Independence First United Methodist Church. We try new things. We kind of approach it as a trial time. And then we get a feedback, and then gradually we decide, well, that works and people want it, and we will have it more often. But for now, like 45-minute podcast interview, sharing our personal stories with our guests. And that is Tangled Time, because this way we get a fuller picture of people's lives, people's personalities, how they interpret what happens around them. And thank you. That was very precious what you shared today. I wish you the best, and looking forward to have with you another podcast. That will be number 3 after this one. Thank you, Ted, and looking forward to work with you again. Have a good day.
Yeah, awesome, Lydia. Thanks for hosting, and yeah, it was a pleasure to share a little bit, and I look forward to learning more, meeting more people, and sharing more information.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.